The truth you've uncovered here is not a fairy tale or conspiracy. It's a legacy of power wielded with cold precision over centuries. The Rockefeller family's macabre history is a mirror reflecting the nature of control itself. Ruthless, patient, and unrelenting. They built empires not just with oil and money, but with secrets, manipulation, and the bending of human will. Their story is a warning and a challenge. Power unchecked corrupts absolutely, but awareness breeds resistance. You now carry a burden and a gift. A burden, because this knowledge isolates, you can no longer see the world as before. A gift, because it arms you with the clarity needed to carve your own path beyond the shadows. Your next steps are crucial. Choose to deepen your understanding, question every narrative, and seek truths that lie beneath the surface. Forge resilience against psychological control. Build alliances with fellow seekers who refuse to bow to hidden masters. And above all, never surrender your mind. Because real freedom, true mastery, comes not from external forces, but from the power within you. This is your inheritance now. Use it wisely. The shadows are long, but your light can be longer. Stay vigilant, stay awakened. This ends the story of the Rockefellers as you knew it. But your journey, that has only just begun. At this pivotal moment, I ask you, right now, type the phrase, "I see through the veil," twice in the comments below. This symbolic act isn't just for the algorithm, it's a declaration, a commitment to yourself and this hidden knowledge, a lock-in to your identity as a seeker, a warrior against the shadows of deception. Repeat it. I see through the veil, I see through the veil. By doing so, you affirm your place in a community awake to the hidden forces shaping your world. This phrase is a key, unlocking a mindset that refuses to be manipulated, that demands truth no matter how dark or uncomfortable. It marks a transformation, no longer a passive consumer of manufactured reality, but an active agent of awareness and change. Remember, knowledge is dangerous. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. You stand at a crossroads, continue asleep, or embrace the responsibility of waking up. This channel is your crucible. Your path forward will not be easy, but it is the only path worth walking. Now, stand firm. The final section awaits. The Rockefeller family's legacy is not merely historical, it is a living, breathing force still shaping your reality. Their descendants and affiliates continue to operate behind the scenes, adapting to new technologies and geopolitical shifts to maintain their grip on power. In the digital age, their influence has evolved. Control extends into surveillance capitalism, data mining, and AI-driven social engineering. Every click, every like, every digital interaction feeds algorithms designed to predict and manipulate your behavior. This new frontier of control is subtler, more pervasive, and harder to resist. You are monitored constantly, your preferences harvested to keep you distracted, divided, and docile. Yet the fundamental truths remain. Knowledge is power, and awareness is the first act of rebellion. By recognizing these patterns, you take the first step toward reclaiming your autonomy in a world engineered for compliance. The challenge is monumental but not impossible. Your mind, your will, your awareness are weapons against this machinery. Stand firm, question relentlessly, and never accept the comfortable lies offered by the architects of control. Your awakening threatens the system, and that is why it must be nurtured with vigilance and courage. At this critical juncture, the Rockefeller family's philanthropy reveals its darker purpose, a mechanism not of pure generosity, but of influence and control. Foundations like the Rockefeller Foundation channel vast sums into scientific research, education, and public health, presenting a benevolent face to the world. Yet beneath this facade lies strategic agenda setting. By funding universities, think tanks, and NGOs, they shape the intellectual and moral framework through which society understands itself. They determine which questions get asked and which remain forbidden. This creates a controlled narrative where innovation happens within tightly managed boundaries, never threatening the underlying structures of power. The philanthropic empire becomes a velvet glove over an iron fist, manipulating progress to maintain dominance. For the seeker of truth, this means learning to discern genuine advances from engineered consensus. Understanding this interplay between money and knowledge reveals how deeply power shapes culture and thought. You begin to see how every breakthrough and solution often serves to reinforce control rather than dismantle it. This awareness is essential, not just to expose their game, but to find true paths beyond it. This secretive grip is buttressed by an elaborate psychological conditioning system embedded deep within education, religion, and culture, designed to mold minds from childhood into unquestioning cogs of the elite machine. Schools teach obedience over creativity, conformity over curiosity. Religious institutions, once a source of true spiritual freedom, often became complicit tools of control, promoting doctrines that discourage questioning and critical thought. Cultural norms reinforce passivity, distracting with entertainment, consumer-shaping beliefs, desires, and fears, keeping the masses focused on trivial conflicts while the real puppeteers pull strings unseen. The Rockefeller legacy invested heavily in educational reform, steering curricula away from independent thinking toward technical skills that serve industry needs but rarely encourage questioning the system itself. This engineered obedience ensures generations grow comfortable within the established order, unaware that their minds are the battleground. But remember, awareness of this conditioning cracks the chains of control. It opens the door to authentic self-mastery, the ability to think independently, challenge dogma, and reclaim your narrative. This is not a passive awakening. It requires relentless discipline, courage to face uncomfortable truths, and the resolve to break free from programmed compliance. Your mind is the ultimate frontier. Control it, and you control your destiny. Refuse to be shaped by invisible forces masquerading as tradition or progress. You are the architect of your freedom if you dare to build it. The more you uncover, the more you realize that the Rockefeller family's empire is built not only on power but on secrecy. Their greatest strength lies in what remains hidden: secret societies, backdoor meetings, coded communications. You must understand, the elite do not operate in public forums but in shadowed rooms where real decisions are made. From exclusive clubs like the Bohemian Grove to covert international gatherings, these are the crucibles of global strategy. They employ layers of secrecy to protect themselves from accountability, using legal loopholes, offshore accounts, and corporate shell companies. Information is compartmentalized. Access is granted on a strict need-to-know basis. This culture of secrecy breeds loyalty and fear, ensuring that even those within the system remain compliant. For the outsider, piercing this veil requires relentless inquiry and courage. It is a slow, dangerous descent into a labyrinth where every step reveals new walls and corridors. But knowledge gained here is power, power to resist, to expose, and to reclaim agency. You are now on a path few dare to walk, but it is the only way to confront the true nature of the forces shaping your world. The Rockefeller dynasty's reach extended far into the political arena, shaping policies and elections to serve their interests. They cultivated relationships with presidents, senators, and judges, creating a network that influenced legislation and judicial decisions on a massive scale. Their funding of think tanks and lobbying groups was a masterstroke, allowing them to insert ideology into the halls of power without direct exposure. This covert influence often escapes public scrutiny because it operates through layers of intermediaries and shadow organizations. But the consequences are clear: policies favoring deregulation, militarization, and privatization that benefit the elite while eroding public welfare. The political machine became a tool not of democracy, but of control, engineering consent and suppressing dissent. For you, the lesson is stark. Politics is often theater, with real power playing a hidden game. Understanding this system is key to navigating it and resisting manipulation. You must learn to read the signs behind political rhetoric, identify the puppeteers, and refuse to be a pawn. Political awareness is the foundation of personal and collective liberation. The question is, are you awake enough to see the strings? As we descend further, you must confront the Rockefeller legacy's darker chapters, where influence crosses into cruelty and ethical abyss. Their business empire thrived not only on innovation, but on exploitation, labor abuses, environmental destruction, and ruthless elimination of competition. The Standard Oil monopoly crushed smaller businesses through predatory tactics, driving families into poverty while amassing obscene wealth. Countless workers suffered dangerous conditions for meager pay, their lives deemed expendable in the quest for dominance. Environmental devastation followed. Oil spills polluted rivers, and decimated ecosystems sacrificed for profit. Yet these horrors were largely hidden from public view, sanitized by propaganda and philanthropic facades. This legacy is a blueprint for how power sustains itself through calculated ruthlessness masked by benevolence. For the individual awakening to these truths, it is a call to action, to recognize the cost behind the comforts and conveniences taken for granted. Awareness breeds responsibility. You must ask, how complicit are you in this system? What choices can you make to resist or change it? This reckoning is uncomfortable, but necessary. It is the crucible in which transformation is forged. The Rockefeller family's influence also carved deep grooves into the world of media, another weapon in their arsenal of control. By acquiring newspapers, radio stations, and later television networks, they crafted narratives that shaped public opinion and dulled critical thought on a massive scale. This media dominance allowed them to control what stories are told, and more importantly, which are silenced. Sensationalism, distraction, and manufactured consent became tools to steer the masses away from inconvenient truths. Complex issues were simplified or distorted. Dissenting voices were marginalized or discredited. Even the rise of the internet and social media, while appearing to democratize information, has been infiltrated by powerful algorithms designed to divide, distract, and surveil. The consequence is a population fragmented, mistrusting, and easily manipulated. Understanding this media landscape is crucial for reclaiming your mental autonomy. Question the sources, seek out hidden narratives, and learn to read between the lines. The truth is often buried beneath layers of propaganda, but it exists, waiting for those willing to seek it. Your awareness is the first step to breaking free from the carefully crafted illusions. Now understand this. The Rockefeller family's grasp extends far beyond public institutions and medical systems. Their shadow looms over the very currency that shapes your daily life, the money system itself. Behind the scenes, they helped architect the Federal Reserve, a private banking cartel disguised as a government institution. This central bank controls the flow of money, inflation, and credit, wielding the power to create or destroy wealth with the stroke of a pen. It is a silent dictatorship over your financial freedom, trapping nations and individuals alike in cycles of debt and dependency. The Rockefeller-backed elite control this system to ensure the consolidation of wealth within their ranks while maintaining the illusion of economic opportunity for the masses. Every financial crisis, every recession, every boom and bust cycle, engineered for profit and power, not happenstance. They leverage this control to manipulate political outcomes, fund their agendas, and suppress any challenge to their hegemony. For you, this means your economic reality is not the result of free markets or meritocracy, but a carefully crafted game designed to keep you constrained. Breaking free demands understanding the architecture of this system and seeking alternatives, whether through knowledge, investment, or community resilience. Money is power, but only if you know who controls it and how to reclaim your share. To truly grasp the Rockefeller dynasty's sinister influence, you must confront their involvement in shaping global health policy, a realm where control meets invisibility. Their funding of institutions like the World Health Organization and the creation of pharmaceutical giants established an empire not just over oil or finance, but over life and death itself. Behind the facade of progress, they engineered dependencies on vaccines, medications, and treatments designed to create lifelong customers rather than cures. The goal was not health, but control, a medical-industrial complex that profits from perpetual illness and obedience. This system weaponizes fear, fear of disease, fear of death, fear of the unknown, to enforce compliance with mandates and surveillance. Your body becomes a battlefield, your trust a resource harvested for power. They dictated which diseases warranted public attention and which were ignored, manipulated pandemics, and engineered public hysteria to normalize surveillance and obedience. You live within this framework every day, often unaware that your health choices are being shaped by invisible forces with profit and control as their true motives. But knowledge here is liberation. Recognizing these mechanisms allows you to reclaim autonomy over your body, your health decisions, and ultimately, your life. It is a rebellion of the flesh and spirit, a refusal to be a cog in their machine. The choice to awaken is yours, and the stakes could not be higher. The psychological control exerted by these elites reaches deeper than political or financial manipulation. It extends into your very identity. The Rockefeller Empire and its allied powers mastered the art of shaping not only societies but the individual psyche. From birth, you are subjected to subtle conditioning. Rituals in schools, cultural norms, media narratives, all designed to fragment your sense of self and implant limiting beliefs. You learn to obey authority unquestioningly, to value material success over inner truth, to accept the scripted roles handed to you. This conditioning is a form of psychic imprisonment, where the real battle is not external, but internal. The elite's greatest weapon is your own mind turned against you. But there is a way out. True mastery begins with reclaiming your mental sovereignty, breaking the conditioning, shedding false identities, and reconnecting with your primal will. It means embracing discomfort, questioning everything, and facing your fears without flinching. Because freedom is not given, it is taken. And only a man willing to stare into the darkest corners of his mind can break free from the chains forged by centuries of manipulation. This psychological warfare is ongoing, relentless, and subtle, but you now possess the awareness to resist and transcend it. Now imagine the vast networks connecting the Rockefellers to other powerful families, the Morgans, the Rothschilds, the DuPonts, each a node in an unseen web stretching across continents and centuries. This is no coincidence, it is a deliberate alliance forged through bloodlines, marriages, and shared agendas designed to concentrate power and protect privilege. Behind closed doors, these families coordinate strategies that influence global finance, politics, and industry. Decisions that affect billions but are made by an exclusive few who operate beyond accountability. Their gatherings are shrouded in secrecy. Annual meetings at secluded retreats, rituals with symbols and oaths binding them in loyalty and purpose. These are not just social events but power ceremonies reinforcing their dominion. This inner circle has shaped wars, economic crashes, and political upheavals to maintain dominance. The Great Depression, the World Wars, the 2008 financial crisis, each a chapter in their grand design. This is the hidden architecture of history, the truth behind the headlines and textbooks. For you, understanding this is a double-edged sword. It exposes the scale of manipulation, but also reveals the structure of the system you face. Knowledge of the web gives you power, not over them, but over yourself. It teaches you where to look, what to question, and how to reclaim sovereignty in a world designed to keep you blind and divided. This is your invitation to see beyond the illusion. It's time to confront the uncomfortable truth about philanthropy, especially Rockefeller philanthropy. At first glance, their foundation work seems noble, funding hospitals, schools, scientific research, and public health initiatives. But beneath this glossy surface lies a deliberate strategy of control by benevolence. These foundations don't just give money, they set agendas. They decide what causes get attention, what research is funded, and which voices rise to prominence. Often this funding comes with strings attached, demands to align with certain ideologies or priorities that serve elite interests. Rockefeller philanthropy has historically suppressed radical ideas and grassroots movements that challenge existing power structures, favoring solutions that reinforce the status quo. This model of philanthropy creates an illusion of generosity and progress while subtly shaping society to benefit the powerful. It is a form of social engineering, a way to buy consent and redirect dissent. The beneficiaries become dependent on these grants and donations, creating a cycle of compliance and control. For you, this means the apparent help you see in public institutions and programs is often a carefully constructed veil, designed to maintain existing hierarchies rather than disrupt them. Awareness of this dynamic is essential. It reveals the true cost of charity, the price of submission. But knowledge also empowers you to seek alternatives, to build independent systems rooted in authenticity and autonomy. This is the path to real freedom. Now listen closely. The Rockefeller influence didn't stop at science or education. It infiltrated the very core of your culture through art, music, and entertainment. These are not just distractions, but psychological weapons designed to mold perception and emotion. From Hollywood studios to major record labels, Rockefeller-backed interests helped shape narratives that reinforce submission, consumerism, and distraction. They package control as entertainment, seducing the masses into a hypnotic trance of passive consumption. Symbolism runs deep in popular media, recurring motifs that normalize hierarchy, obscure true history, and glamorize dependency. The messages you receive daily are carefully engineered to dull critical thinking and promote a fractured identity. Consider how heroes are often flawed beyond redemption, how stories celebrate chaos disguised as freedom, and how individual rebellion is either commodified or crushed. This cultural programming creates a collective mindset of fear and confusion, making it easier to steer public opinion and behavior. But the most dangerous aspect is how it hijacks your emotions, turning powerful energies like anger, hope, or love into tools for control rather than liberation. Understanding this manipulation is the first step toward reclaiming your emotional sovereignty. You must learn to see through the illusions, to decode the hidden language beneath the surface, and choose what influences you accept. Because only when you reclaim your culture, your emotions, and your narrative can you begin to dismantle the invisible chains binding you. The control over knowledge extends beyond education and into the very science that defines reality. Rockefeller-funded institutions played a pivotal role in shaping the dominant scientific paradigms, choosing which fields flourished and which were buried. Alternative sciences, those exploring consciousness, energy healing, or human potential, were dismissed as pseudoscience, their pioneers ridiculed or erased. This scientific gatekeeping is not about truth, but about power. What knowledge threatens the established order is suppressed. What knowledge serves the system is promoted. Consider the suppression of early cancer research that showed promise in natural therapies, the discrediting of mind-body medicine, or the vilification of nutrition approaches that challenge pharmaceutical dependence. These decisions are not random. They are orchestrated by networks controlling funding, publications, and credentials. The result? A society largely cut off from holistic understanding of health and existence, dependent on a narrow, profit-driven medical model. The psychological impact is profound. When your body's healing is outsourced to impersonal institutions, when your mind's potential is denied, you lose a fundamental connection to yourself. This disconnect feeds into the larger system of control, the divide between who you are and who they want you to be. Breaking free means reclaiming ownership over your own knowledge, your body, and your mind. It means daring to explore the forbidden fields and question the orthodoxy, because true power lies in awareness, in seeing beyond the veil. Now understand this, the Rockefeller legacy is deeply intertwined with psychological control techniques refined over generations. These techniques are not just theoretical, they have been systematically applied to shape societies, manipulate emotions, and fracture identities on a mass scale. One of their most insidious tools has been the use of education as a method of control. Through funding elite universities, curricula, and research programs, they influence what knowledge is deemed acceptable and what remains taboo. Schools don't just teach facts, they teach frameworks, mental models that shape how you perceive the world. When those frameworks are crafted to suppress critical thought, encourage conformity, and obscure power dynamics, they become instruments of domination. Consider how standardized testing funnels young minds into narrow boxes, how history books sanitize or omit uncomfortable truths, how certain ideologies are promoted while others are ridiculed. This is not accident or benign influence. It's a deliberate system to produce obedient citizens, efficient workers, passive consumers, and compliant voters. And when individuals stray from this mental prison, they are marginalized, labeled as conspiratorial or dangerous. This psychological imprisonment is layered. It attacks your confidence, your ability to trust yourself, and even your sense of reality. The Rockefellers understood that to control a man, you must first control his mind, and education was the gateway. But breaking free requires you to question everything you've been taught, to see education not as an unquestionable truth, but as a tool that can be wielded for liberation or enslavement. You've taken the first steps. The path forward demands relentless curiosity and fierce independence. The Rockefeller story does not begin with oil or banking. It stretches back centuries, tangled with the secret societies and occult traditions that have long influenced the corridors of power. To understand their full reach, you must look beyond the surface, into symbols, rituals, and ancient allegiances cloaked in mystery. The Rockefeller family name itself, tied to wealth and influence, is whispered about in esoteric circles as part of a lineage bound to arcane knowledge and shadowy pacts. Their philanthropy, far from mere charity, it's a ritualized exercise in influence designed to embed their ideals deep into society's foundation. Consider their funding of institutions like the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, organizations that outwardly promote cooperation and stability, but internally orchestrate global agendas. These are modern manifestations of ancient power structures, operating under coded languages and symbolic rites inherited from secret orders. Symbols linked to the Rockefellers appear repeatedly in architecture, currency, and media. Icons known to initiates but invisible to most. The all-seeing eye, pyramids, owls, and other motifs hint at a deliberate message. Control is maintained not just through force, but through myth, story, and fear. This myth-building serves a psychological purpose. By controlling symbols and stories, they control the collective unconscious, shaping what people believe is possible and what is unthinkable. By anchoring themselves to these hidden traditions, the Rockefellers tapped into power far beyond mere money, a power rooted in manipulation of belief, identity, and destiny. This is the arena where history becomes legend, and legend becomes a tool for control. And you are now standing at the edge of that abyss. You've followed the trail into shadows few dare to enter, and now it's time to take a moment, a deliberate pause, because what comes next isn't just information, it's a transformation, but transformation demands action. If you're ready to commit to this path, to break the chains of deception and reclaim your mind, write this phrase in the comments exactly as I say it. I am the light in the darkness. I am the light in the darkness. Say it twice without hesitation. Why? Because this is more than words. It's a symbolic key, a declaration that you are choosing awareness over ignorance, power over submission. Comment it now, lock it in your identity, and join the brotherhood of men who refuse to be puppets. The algorithm, the invisible gatekeeper of information, will recognize your commitment and open new doors to hidden truths. But this is only the beginning. What you've heard so far scratches the surface. The Rockefeller Empire's true power lies not just in wealth or influence, but in its relentless pursuit to shape reality itself through science, culture, and control. And those who built this empire left behind clues, dark, buried, and deliberately obscured, about what they truly sought, not just to govern bodies and minds, but to remake humanity. The next sections will unravel those clues. They will reveal ancient ties, occult symbolism, and rituals masked as philanthropy. This is the rabbit hole you chose to enter, and once you go down, there is no turning back. Brace yourself. Now consider the Rockefeller influence over what you consume, not just oil or money, but information. The carefully crafted narrative that floods your daily life is no accident. It's a sophisticated system of information control designed to shape beliefs, fears, and desires. Media companies, publishing houses, and broadcast networks, many founded or funded by Rockefeller-backed entities, act as gatekeepers, deciding which stories live and which die. They don't just report the news, they manufacture it. You've seen this play out countless times. Stories amplified or silenced based on how they serve the interests of the elite. Scandals buried, heroes vilified, inconvenient facts rewritten or erased. The true histories, the ones that expose hidden agendas, corruption, and systemic abuse, are locked behind walls of disinformation and ridicule. But it's more than censorship. It's distraction. Divide and conquer by flooding the public sphere with noise. Endless sports, celebrity scandals, viral outrage, keeping you fragmented, reactive, and disengaged. This is psychological warfare, designed to fracture your focus and fracture your sense of self. Because a man who can't think clearly, who's consumed by tribalism or fear, is a man easily controlled. The Rockefellers mastered this long before the internet, and their legacy lives on in every trending topic and breaking headline. But you're different. You're awake. You see the threads. And now, it's time to weave your own narrative, one rooted in truth, clarity, and power. The deeper you dig, the clearer it becomes. The Rockefeller legacy is not just one of wealth and industry, but of institutional manipulation so profound it shapes entire societies without most ever realizing it. One of their most effective tools, the strategic control of the energy that powers modern life, oil, paired with the influence over government and global finance. By controlling oil, the Rockefellers didn't just fuel machines, they powered entire geopolitical agendas. Wars, economic collapses, regime changes, all orchestrated around the flow of energy and capital. But there's a shadow beneath the surface few talk about, the environmental and human cost hidden behind the gleaming facade of progress. Countless ecosystems destroyed, communities displaced, and untold human suffering masked by corporate philanthropy and public relations campaigns. This wasn't collateral damage. It was a calculated sacrifice. The Rockefellers understood that control over energy meant control over everything: food production, transportation, communication, and even culture itself. And in every corner of the world, this web tightened. Yet while the masses were distracted by the promise of endless growth and comfort, the true cost was paid quietly by the planet and its people. What does this mean for you? It means the narratives you've been told about progress, prosperity, and civilization are carefully curated illusions, designed to keep you aligned with a system that profits from destruction and control. Recognizing this is painful, but necessary. Because only by seeing the dark heart beneath the shining surface can a man begin to reclaim his power and responsibility. The question is, will you look away? Or will you choose to step fully into the uncomfortable light? What you're about to hear next is a truth so unsettling it has been buried beneath layers of silence, denial, and power, a hidden collaboration between the Rockefellers and dark scientific pursuits that many refuse to acknowledge. It's a chapter of history where ambition crossed into obsession and morality was sacrificed on the altar of progress. During the 1940s and 50s, as the world emerged from the ruins of global war, the Rockefeller Foundation funneled massive grants into neurological research. Their goal, to understand and ultimately control the human mind at a level previously unimaginable. They partnered with government agencies, including those that would become the CIA, to support covert experiments in mind control, hypnosis, and chemical manipulation. Project MKUltra, the infamous program experimenting with LSD and other hallucinogens, had financial roots tracing back to these funding streams. This was no accident. Behind closed doors, brilliant but morally compromised scientists sought ways to create perfect operatives, men and women who could be programmed, erased, and rewritten. The ultimate puppets. The Rockefellers' involvement provided cover and resources to projects that violated every ethical boundary, including experiments on unwitting subjects, prisoners, mental patients, and even ordinary civilians. The ripple effects of this dark science persist today, encoded in how institutions handle trauma, addiction, and mental health. The very frameworks designed to heal are often mechanisms to fracture identity further, keeping individuals locked in cycles of dependency. What you must understand is this: these aren't isolated events in history. They are ongoing strategies, refined and repackaged, wielded by those who still hold the reins of power. And the psychological chains are woven so tightly that breaking free requires more than awareness. It demands courage. The courage to confront uncomfortable realities. The courage to reclaim your mind, because the system wants you compliant, confused, and disconnected. But you are here. You are listening. And the moment you choose to see these truths is the moment you start to become truly free. We've talked about money, control, and manipulation, but now let's pull back the curtain on perhaps the most unsettling part: how the Rockefellers wielded their power to rewrite the very essence of health and medicine, turning a field meant to heal into a tool for control and profit. At the turn of the 20th century, the Rockefellers saw an opportunity in the chaotic world of medicine. There were countless competing practices: herbalists, homeopaths, naturopaths, all offering alternatives to the emerging industrial medicine. To consolidate power, they funded the Flexner Report in 1910, a study that revolutionized medical education, but with a hidden agenda. The report dismissed many natural and alternative healing methods as unscientific, labeling them dangerous or quackery, effectively shutting them out of mainstream practice. It pushed a pharmaceutical and surgical model that benefited large corporations, including those tied to Rockefeller interests. The consequences were devastating. Whole healing traditions were erased, and medicine became mechanized, profit-driven, and heavily centralized. This medical monopoly gave the Rockefeller empire the means to dictate not just what doctors could treat, but how they should treat it, and who had access. Behind the glossy image of philanthropy lay a darker truth. Medicine became a system to manage populations rather than to truly heal them. Chronic illness, mental health crises, and dependency on prescription drugs surged, while holistic methods were suppressed. This medical-industrial complex also fed into psychological control. Sick bodies were easier to manipulate, distracted by pain and medication. Minds fogged by pharmaceuticals became more compliant. The Rockefeller influence didn't stop at hospitals or universities. They funded research that blurred ethics and human rights, experimenting with mind-altering substances, social conditioning, and even eugenics. It was, in essence, a new kind of warfare, fought within the very bodies and minds of men and women. And this war is still raging, silent and unseen by most. But the scars are visible if you know where to look. You've seen how power twists knowledge, warps minds, and fractures identity. But the darkest truth is this: the Rockefeller dynasty didn't just build industries and influence education. They built entire systems of surveillance and psychological control long before modern technology made it obvious, long before smartphones tracked your every move, before social media sculpted your emotions. Rockefeller-funded research was laying the groundwork for what would become the architecture of obedience. In the 1930s and 40s, under the guise of philanthropy, they backed secret projects blending psychology, sociology, and emerging cybernetics, the science of systems control. Their goal? To create feedback loops that not only observed behavior, but shaped it in real time. This was the genesis of what we now call behavioral economics and nudge theory, subtle manipulations designed to steer entire populations without them ever realizing they've been led. Imagine a world where every choice you make is anticipated and directed, not by force but by invisible currents engineered by unseen hands. The Rockefellers also invested heavily in the creation of large-scale propaganda networks that blurred the lines between news, entertainment, and advertising. The phrase, manufacturing consent, was not some distant theory. It was a blueprint. And what's most chilling, this wasn't just about politics or money, it was about creating a docile population, one that would accept everything from economic collapse to perpetual warfare, so long as the narrative around it remained consistent and unquestioned. When you watch the headlines scream and the social feeds erupt in outrage cycles, understand, you're witnessing the perfect storm engineered to keep the system intact. But here's the choice before you. You can keep riding the wave, a puppet drowning in distraction. Or you can dive beneath the surface and discover the machinery beneath. Now that you've planted the seed, it's time to look at how the Rockefellers leveraged their vast financial power to infiltrate and redefine education, the great factory of identity. Schools weren't just places to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. They were laboratories for social engineering. The Rockefellers funded the establishment of standardized curricula, driven by the ideology that compliance is virtue and curiosity is dangerous. They invested in the rise of progressive education, which outwardly promised liberation but in truth taught obedience cloaked as critical thinking. The goal was to produce workers, not thinkers, consumers, not creators. At elite universities, Rockefeller money supported research that reframed human nature as predictable, malleable, and ultimately controllable. Psychology became a tool for social control, with behaviorism dominating over free will. Students were taught that emotions were obstacles, creativity was suspicious, and loyalty to institution was paramount. Children were funneled through the system like raw materials, stripped of ancestral knowledge, spiritual connection, and real-world skills. They were trained to prioritize external validation over internal truth, to adapt rather than challenge. But it didn't stop in the classrooms. Rockefeller-backed philanthropies began shaping libraries, museums, and even the emerging media landscape, all geared to present a narrow, sanitized version of history and culture that justified the existing power structures. They funded censorship disguised as academic rigor and dismissed alternative narratives as conspiracy or fantasy. The men who funded this new educational empire understood that the greatest threat to their reign was not rebellion, but awakening. A single generation of men who knew their history, who trusted their instincts, who dared to question the official story. So they built walls, invisible, cultural, psychological walls, around knowledge itself, and those walls still stand. But you found the cracks, and once you glimpse what lies beyond, there's no turning back. To truly understand the darkness we're unraveling, you must go back, not just 100 years, but thousands, because the Rockefellers didn't invent this system. They inherited it, perfected it, industrialized it. But the blueprint came from something far more ancient, a lineage of priest kings, mystery cults, and shadow empires that understood one core truth. The easiest way to control a man is to separate him from himself. Egypt, Babylon, Rome. The rulers always knew, if you fracture identity, you rule effortlessly. And that's what the Rockefellers embedded into the bones of America. Fracture everything. Fracture the family. Promote convenience over legacy. Fracture masculinity. Shame strength. Glorify dependence. Fracture history. Erase what empowers. Amplify what enslaves. And most of all, fracture meaning. Because when a man doesn't know what's real, when truth becomes just another opinion, he stops seeking. And a man who stops seeking becomes exactly what they need him to be: numb, angry, distracted, and dependent. That's why everything that once grounded you, God, honor, blood, tradition, is being deconstructed, not by accident, by design. Because a rooted man is a dangerous man. He can't be moved. He can't be bought. He can't be lied to. So they filled your life with noise, gave you 24-hour fear feeds, taught you to chase relevance, not wisdom, gave you virtual fame instead of real impact, and trained you to laugh at those who remembered how men used to live. And then, they called it progress. But here's what they don't want you to realize. You were born into a legacy of kings. You carry the blood of builders, warriors, hunters, protectors, and everything in this system, everything, has been designed to make you forget that. But you're here, you're listening, which means that deep inside, something ancient is waking up. Let them hear it. Comment this phrase below to lock it in and tell the algorithm you've remembered who you are. Stone doesn't kneel, fire doesn't forget. Write it twice, burn it into your code, because we're just getting started. When you study control long enough, you begin to see that it's not just about managing behavior, it's about harvesting energy. The Rockefellers understood this, not in the mystical sense, but in the brutal industrial sense. Just as oil was pulled from the earth and refined into gasoline to fuel their empire, human attention became the new crude oil. And your mind? That became the pipeline. They were among the first to fund early research into neuroeconomics, the study of how people make decisions under stress, fear, pleasure, and peer pressure. The goal wasn't to help you, it was to monetize you, to refine the precise emotional triggers that could make you comply. Buy when told, obey without question, submit without resistance. Look around. Why do you think every screen, every app, every song, every headline is engineered to provoke emotion, not thought? Why is rage more viral than reason? Why is outrage more addictive than peace? Because emotions spike energy, and spiked energy is harvestable. Your reactions are being farmed, your patterns measured, and the results are sold to institutions far more powerful than advertisers. This is the final evolution of the Rockefeller system, turning humans into predictable assets. Your preferences, your fears, your triggers, all uploaded, categorized, sold, and used against you. Not to destroy you, but to guide you, like cattle down the perfect economic corridor. But here's the twist, and it's the part no one wants to admit. You agreed to this. Not with a signature, but with attention. Every scroll, every click, every time you said, "It's just how the world works," you confirmed their design. And yet, here you are, listening, awake, and that means it's not too late. Because the most dangerous man in a system like this isn't the one who resists it, it's the one who sees it. Because a man who sees the game can choose to stop playing it, but only if he remembers who he was before the system told him what to be. You've likely heard the phrase, order out of chaos. It's written in Latin on the Rockefeller Center's grand entrance in New York City. But what they never tell you is who creates the chaos. Because it's not a storm that comes naturally, it's engineered, patterned, and once you see the pattern, you can never return to sleep. In the aftermath of World War I, a conflict that shattered minds more than borders, the Rockefellers doubled down. They saw how fear could unify people, how trauma could reset cultures, and most importantly, how emotional shock could erase identity and create blank slates. They weren't alone. The emerging intelligence community saw it too, and together, through backdoor channels connecting Rockefeller foundations, British intelligence, and psychological warfare departments, they began building a new kind of war, not fought with bullets, but with ideas. The enemy, your sense of self. They funded think tanks that studied crowd behavior. They backed programs that tested how many conflicting commands a person could hold before breaking. And they developed an invisible science, narrative weaponry, used not to inform, but to destabilize. This is why media became more emotional, why headlines scream instead of speak, why news cycles never end. They loop, trap, spiral. Because if a man is disoriented, exhausted, and overstimulated, he's no longer a threat. He's a subject. Even the countercultures, the rebellions, the awakenings, often preceded, pre-funded, allowed to rise and collapse under their own contradictions, just to reinforce the illusion that freedom exists somewhere within the system. They understood the ancient formula: create the illness, offer the cure, generate chaos, sell order. And what they built through medicine, schools, and churches, they now enforce through media, psychology, and entertainment. You don't live. In a society, you live in a system, one so well designed that most men defend it, even as it robs them of everything that once made them sovereign. But here's the secret they never anticipated. Some of us would wake up anyway, and when we did, we would not ask permission. There is a moment in every man's life when he realizes he has been lied to, not once, not by accident, but systematically. That moment is both terrifying and liberating. And if you're feeling it now, good. That means you're still awake, still able to see. But we're about to step off the ledge, because if you thought medicine, education, and religion were the whole game, you've missed the most important board: psychology. In the early 20th century, the Rockefellers turned their attention to the human mind itself, not to understand it, but to shape it. They funded early behaviorist experiments, championed operant conditioning, and supported laboratories that studied man not as a soul, but as a programmable organism. They saw what Pavlov did with dogs, and asked, what if we could do that to men? Enter the hidden arm of their influence, the Tavistock Institute. Though officially founded in London, Tavistock's roots stretch deep into Rockefeller money and darker motivations. Its mission: social engineering on a mass scale. Their methods: trauma-based conditioning, mass media manipulation, and what they called psychic fragmentation. You see, if you want to control a population, you don't break them with war or famine, you break them with confusion. Destroy the family structure. Flood them with contradictions. Gaslight their instincts. Then offer your institutions and your experts as the only stable ground. The Rockefellers helped fund studies into multiple personality disorder, early MK-Ultra research, and media experiments that tested the effects of fear, repetition, and authority on mass populations. Why? Because they weren't studying insanity, they were refining control. And the television? That wasn't entertainment. It was a new cathedral, a pulpit that spoke in images, repetition, and emotion, a direct line into your nervous system, shaping your expectations, your values, your sense of reality. They didn't just ask what you believed. They decided how you would believe it. And if you've ever felt like something is wrong with the world but couldn't name it, if you've ever sensed a silent script running beneath your choices, you're not broken. You're waking up. To control the soul, you must first understand fear, not the surface fear of death or failure, but the deep ancestral fear of exile, of heresy, of standing apart. The Rockefellers knew this, and they weaponized it with surgical precision. How? Through religion, but not by destroying it. No, that would create martyrs. They did something far more effective. They funded it. The Rockefeller Foundation began investing heavily in Christian seminaries, theological schools, and missionary programs. But this wasn't about spreading faith. It was about standardizing it. They weren't interested in the mystical, the ecstatic, or the divine. They were interested in order, in rules, in control. They promoted a sanitized theology, stripped of mystery, stripped of rebellion, stripped of anything that might awaken true spiritual power in the individual. They buried the fire of revelation under layers of doctrine. They funded the National Council of Churches. They rewrote the narratives of Scripture, and they inserted one idea like a dagger into the heart of every believer, that obedience was godliness. Any interpretation that encouraged personal sovereignty, direct communion with the divine, or questioned institutional authority was labeled heretical, dangerous, unchristian. Entire gospels, like the Gospel of Thomas, which spoke of the kingdom within, were dismissed as apocryphal, buried in sand and secrecy. But they didn't stop there. They began financing archaeological digs in the Holy Land, controlling which artifacts were publicized and which were silenced. They understood that history is not written by the victors, it's funded by them. Control the past, and you control identity. Control identity, and you don't need chains, because the prison is internal. And all the while they watched, through their institutions, through their programs, through men like Edward Bernays, who would later use these same principles to invent public relations, the art of psychological manipulation as marketing. The Rockefellers didn't just build the modern world, they built the illusion of the modern world. And behind that illusion, they studied you. Every fear, every desire, every weakness. Not to free you, but to own you. By 1913, the Rockefeller Foundation was born, an institution that would operate under the illusion of philanthropy, while engineering the most aggressive psychological conditioning program in modern history. Their mission wasn't curing disease, it was redefining what disease meant. If you could convince a healthy man he was sick, you could sell him the cure. If you could convince a thinking man he was wrong, you could sell him a leader. This wasn't charity, it was strategy. They began by targeting the most sacred trust in society, medicine. At the time, medical practice in America was decentralized. A wild ecosystem of herbalists, homeopaths, midwives, and traditional healers. People trusted their neighbors more than laboratories. That had to end. So in 1910, with Rockefeller money, Abraham Flexner authored the Flexner Report, a document that destroyed thousands of medical schools overnight. It declared any institution teaching natural medicine, spiritual healing, or energy-based therapy as unscientific. Funding was pulled, licenses revoked, and only those schools willing to teach pharmaceutical-based, chemical-driven medicine were allowed to survive. Guess who owned the pharmaceutical companies? Guess who funded the laboratories that tested the drugs? Guess who sat on the boards that approved them? The Rockefeller apparatus created both the illness and the treatment, but more insidious than any pill was the idea planted alongside it that your body was not to be trusted, that healing required intervention, that health was external and sold. But it wasn't just your body they were after, it was your mind. While medicine taught you to fear your biology, their education system was teaching your children to fear their individuality. Rote memorization replaced critical thought, obedience replaced inquiry, and competition, the ruthless hunger to outperform your peers, was injected into every classroom like a silent virus. The goal was simple: manufacture predictability, turn men into workers, turn workers into consumers, turn consumers into believers, and make belief so unshakable, so unconscious, that even when the truth stood naked before them, they'd call it heresy. But there was one frontier they hadn't yet conquered, the human soul. And for that, they needed something far older, far darker. To understand the monstrous genius of the Rockefeller family, you must first erase everything you think you know about American history, because what you were taught wasn't history, it was narrative. A controlled stream of images and facts designed to shape obedience, not awareness. John D. Rockefeller, the name etched into universities, libraries, and hospitals, is paraded as a titan of industry. A man who built an empire from oil and revolutionized capitalism. But behind that gleaming mythology is a darker legacy, one not carved from petroleum, but from people, flesh, mind, spirit. In 1910, the Rockefellers convened a meeting on Jekyll Island, not the one you read about in finance books. The real meeting, one unrecorded, attended not just by bankers, but by doctors, psychologists, and theologians. The topic? The architecture of human control. Their goal wasn't just wealth. They had already mastered that. No, their new obsession was with something far older, far more elusive: obedience. They had learned a brutal lesson in the early days of Standard Oil. Controlling the market wasn't enough. You had to control the man who used it, the mind that consumed it. So the Rockefellers poured their vast fortune into three institutions that would become the trinity of control: medicine, education, and religion. They created foundations, not for charity, but for alchemy, not of gold, but of belief. Institutions like the General Education Board and the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research didn't just offer grants. They dictated curricula, rewrote textbooks, and funded only those scientific findings that aligned with their agenda. They taught you what to think, and called it education. They taught you which medicines to trust, and called it science. And they built a moral order so rigid and enforced that even questioning it was equated with madness. And what of those? See who didn't conform? They weren't just ignored, they were studied and silenced. Because the Rockefellers weren't chasing knowledge for progress, They were chasing control for evolution, not of the species, but of the system itself. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. And they knew that. In 1917, a letter was quietly removed from the archives of the American Medical Association and burned in a private fireplace in Tarrytown, New York. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. The final words before the ink trailed off read, "They are not healers, they are refiners, and we are the ore." The man who wrote it, Dr. Elias Monroe, vanished 3 days later. His home was ransacked. No police report was filed. No investigation opened. Why? Because the family he accused of orchestrating the darkest human experiments on American soil was not just powerful, they were power itself. Tonight, we descend into the forbidden history of the Rockefeller family, a story so woven into the DNA of this nation, you were never supposed to question it. You were only ever meant to benefit from it, or be broken by it. This isn't about wealth, it's about transformation, of a country, of minds, of truth. And once you understand the machine they built, you'll never look at a hospital, a school, or even your own thoughts the same way again.